Not your literature
I
review, but your
designed,
instruments.
I designed some instruments I would like to show you.
Okay.
Show them. Did you receive my first questionnaire that I sent you?
Did you receive my email?
Yes, just you sent me a link
Mhm.
from last 2, 3 on weeks back.
Um,
And it
you
was a
didn't
little
get
bit
my.
confused because I thought.
Okay, let me take a look here. Let's see what I did here. Make sure I didn't include the wrong link. All right, so here's the feedback link. Let me see if I gave you the right link. Oops.
Si tiene una empresa, tiene una historia, y toda historia necesita un público.
No.
¿Cómo encontrar al público que se interese más
I
en
think
su
I gave you the
historia
wrong link.
y ayude a su empresa a crecer?
Let me check this real quick. I think I must have deleted the video. I created a video describing. Here it is right here. Okay, here's the video.
Taking a look
All right, I'm going to upload this today, but I'll talk to you. But this is what I.
at your instrument, your questionnaire, and
That's weird.
and I would first maybe see about bringing the information about the university, and if you can make that.
All right, I'm going to upload this video.
Did you send it or not?
I sent you the wrong link. I made the video. I thought I uploaded it to YouTube, but I didn't. So I'll do that today.
Okay.
And
But can you give me
sure.
In general?
So let me just show you here what I'm suggesting here. The first thing here, I would try to, so we can eliminate some of this white space, bring this logo over to the right, bring this text up to the center, up higher, and I would just single space so we can move kind of all this information up towards the top.
Okay.
Now here you have teacher's name and date. Think about all the independent variables that you want to include that you think you need for both choosing your participants and also information that you will need later with all the other data collection techniques. Information like maybe the school or the institution where the teacher works, maybe years of experience, maybe years of education, maybe the age, how long the teacher's been in the field, what is their experience. Any information that you think will help you later to do the rest of your research. I would include this information here at the top.
Okay.
So leave blanks so that the teacher then can go and just fill out that information quickly. Then I would follow up by a few sentences, starting off first introducing yourself and stating that you are a student at the university, that you're doing research, very general, explain the purpose of your research. And the last sentence would be instructions saying something like, please complete the following questions to the best of your ability, or some general instructions to lead into your questions. So that's what I would include here in the heading, trying to bring all of this up as much as you can, but maybe provide a little bit more information for any independent variables that you think that you need. The first question here, how long have you been teaching? Now that would be probably an independent variable that you could include at the top, right?
Okay.
So think of the questions that you have down here at the bottom as questions that really pertain to the dependent variables. That is, asking questions specifically about the research questions that you have, but not so much about them personally or their context. Okay. How many students do you have? That can go at the top. How many groups do you have? You could have how many groups and what level groups. That could be information at the top in your heading that they could fill out at the beginning. Now, how often do you work with reading or reading comprehension? Now, that might be the first question.
Because you said that before applying the questionnaires, I have to apply a general questionnaire about reading, just reading, no focus on reading comprehension. Then, in order to select the appropriate teachers to apply the next questionnaires about reading comprehension, cognitive strategies, the interview, the...
Right, you don't have to mention strategies, but you can say how often do you work with reading or reading comprehension.
Okay.
Either way, how often do you work with reading with your students?
Mhm.
Right, I would, or with your English language learners, to even be more specific. Now, on question 4, I think this is one of the questions I mentioned in the video. What are other facilities besides the classroom for students to practice their reading? Are you referring? I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to
For example,
when you say facilities.
For example, when they go to uh, like a club, when they see videos, watch videos, they have conversation, small groups. I don't know how to say that word, the name of the place and where they work.
I mean, are you interested in the actual place or the materials?
Well, the material about reading comprehension, where they can practice.
I mean, you you might
Well,
just
for
say
example,
something like, where do your students practice reading, or where do your students practice reading outside the classroom?
Okay, for
And
example,
then
the
they
library.
And then she
teachers
could say they
uh,
practice at the library,
Uh-huh.
they practice
Okay.
at home, whatever.
Just change a little bit the question.
Yeah, and take out facilities because that was kind of the confusing. I think I understood what you were asking, but it wasn't really clear when you mentioned that word. So I would just keep it open, rephrase it.
Okay.
How do you promote reading? Now I want us to focus too on the order in which you're presenting this question. So if you're saying how often, let's see. How often do you work with reading? How do you promote reading? How often do you work with reading? How do you promote reading? I would bring those questions closer together. They're very much related. So maybe you start with first, how do you promote reading? And then how often do you promote it?
Okay.
Or, yeah, just kind of bring those together. What are your goals for reading activities? Maybe bring that up. Do your students enjoy reading activities? Why? Are your students familiarized with reading? Now, here you're asking, do your students enjoy reading activities? I'm assuming reading in English. Or are you asking in Spanish?
No, in English.
So I would specify
Okay.
that. Are your students familiarized with reading? What do you mean by familiarized with reading? Are your students familiarized with reading?
Oh, if they tend to read in the English classes, or the teachers never apply reading activities. If they read at home, maybe some reading in English.
So are you
have
ask-
a contact, a touch with the.
Okay.
the
So
reading
maybe
activity.
ask instead on question 8, do your students read on their own? That is, they read without somebody forcing them. Now that's really very much like question 7. Do they enjoy reading? Because if they enjoy reading, I'm assuming they're going to be reading on their own. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. But anyway, it's. I guess we can leave those as separate questions. What type of problems do you notice when students practice reading? How do you help students when they have problems when reading? I would state someplace that all of the questions pertain to reading English as a second language. Either say it at the very beginning once, or say it each time in your questions, just so it's clear that you are only focused on English, reading English as a reading for English language learners, or reading English as a foreign language. So not to get confused with reading in Spanish.
Because I need to specify.
I would specify it either at the very beginning, and say that you are only focusing on reading of English as a foreign language, and then you're fine. Or if you don't mention at the top, mention in each question. Every time you say reading English as a foreign language. Reading English as a foreign language each
Because
time.
I mentioned that. No, I didn't mention this on the.
No, you didn't
on the
mention it.
introduction, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, make it really clear. It has to be very, very clear and explicit so that there's no confusion, because you have to consider how might your respondents, how might your teachers interpret this? How could they answer? There could be some misunderstanding, based on, not explicitly asking the right questions, right? So I think that's it, really. I don't think you have. You just have 10 questions, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So that would be, how I would.
I have another question. Okay, I know I have to modify the first question, but I'm thinking about what I'm gonna apply after that question.
Yes.
Did you check, please? But this is more related with cognitive strategies.
Now, what is this?
This is a question about cognitive strategies for the teachers who I'm gonna apply after that.
Okay, so once you select, how many teachers are you planning on selecting?
2 or 3.
So once you have selected your 2 or 3 participants, you're not going to need another questionnaire.
No.
The information that you have here, you need to find out through observations and interviews for the teacher.
Let me show you the rubric, the I design for the observation. According to the suggestion you told me, I designed an observation taking into consideration the stages, time, activities.
Okay, so the next observation sheet. Okay, I think what I suggested here was you're gonna be taking field notes, okay, and you're gonna have a heading here, and in your heading you're gonna have very much the same type of information that you have here. Maybe not all of it, but you're gonna have like the teacher's name, the date, the class, the type of class, maybe the age group, maybe the English level. But you're gonna have this information here at the top of your observation sheet as a heading. And then what I would do is simply put on the left-hand side of the sheet, I would write out time, activity, and description. And you have 3 sections. So when you're observing, you're going to be recording your class, but you simply, with your watch, write down the beginning and end time of each activity. So let's say at the beginning the teacher does roll call, right at 8 o'clock. So you write down 8 o'clock is the start time, and you write down roll call. Now, roll call, this activity, you decide, you categorize it however you want, but you just give it a general description of whatever it is that the teacher's doing. Then you describe. Now in this case, roll call, there's not much to do. Let's say the roll call lasts 5 minutes. So the teacher finishes at 8:05, and then you come down here and you write this again, time, and you can even just abbreviate TAD. Okay, time, activity, description. And now it's 8:05. Okay, and let's say the teacher presents a video. So you just write like a video, like a warm up. Okay, you just write video, or maybe you write warm up if you want. And then you write whatever you see. What does the teacher say? What does the teacher do? What do the students say? What do the students do? And this is what you're looking. This is what you're writing out. You're constantly writing, and you're writing as much as possible. When the teacher writes something on the board, I write WOB, write on board, writes on board, and then I write what she writes or he writes. I actually write it down. And then I say, okay, one student asks this question, and you're just writing as much as you can. Now, if you don't get all of the information, that's fine. But you want to get as much information as possible so that you can complement your field notes, what you write down, with what you have on your recording. Because you'll have your recording, and hopefully you can get the details and go back later and hear exactly what was said. Here, you're just writing to the best that you can what they say. But the purpose here is to, between your field notes and your recording, compare those two so that later you can recall as much as possible and you can analyze exactly what happened and when it happened. And with this time stamp, you're going to be able to know here how long, things happened, how long activities took, or, if they repeated. Let's say this activity took 15 minutes and it takes you to 8:20. Then you do it again. Oops, TAD. Right? And then now you're at 8:20 and you start another activity. Now you're writing. You're constantly writing.
So you have to create an observation sheet similar to this?
Well, I think this would be a little easier,
Yeah.
and this would help you. You're writing as much description here.
Because it's going to be
here. Yeah, there's less description here, and I just want to make sure that your field notes, that you have enough information that helps you later when you have to analyze. Okay, so you have, when you do reading comprehension, you're not analyzing when you observe. It's very important not to mix analyzing and observing. When you observe, you're observing, that's all. Don't worry about, what strategies? Oh, they're using a strategy here. Forget it. All you're doing is writing what you see. You're not going to write, oh, I think the teacher here was thinking this. No, just write out what it is, what happens. Later, if you can analyze it, say, I wonder in this second activity on this day, I wonder what the teacher was thinking when she was doing this. I need to ask her that question. Okay, but that's later. That's when you have it, you have the recording and you have the field notes and you're analyzing the information. Okay? So I would just write out a heading and then write this out one time and then leave it all blank space. That's your observation sheet. And then you can fill it in.
When I observe the teacher, can I write on the notebook, or do I need to design first on the maybe in a Word document?
Well, it's up to you if you want to keep field notes on.
Yeah, because I can write a lot in.
If you write faster,
and
just
then
write in a notebook.
pass the information to the.
What you can do is on the computer, just write out the heading with the information and time, activity, description one time. And then print it out. And then that would be your observation sheet. Now you have your observation sheet, and you print out however many observation sheets you need. But keep it all, the rest of it would be open space. So here's your sheet. This is basically all you're going to have at the beginning in your document. All this is going to be white space. Which is fine, you can just fill it out and write. Okay? So now you have your observation sheet. You have your initial questionnaire. Now you're going to probably need an interview guide, right, for your participants. Now when you interview your teachers, you're going to need to prepare a similar sheet, right, that you take with you, that you look at before you do your interview, and while you have the interview, you have something there that helps you as a guide to make sure that you don't forget to ask certain types of questions. They try to do a semi-structured interview, and what I would recommend, there are various ways that you can do this. One thing I would do is to write your research questions somewhere on your interview guide, and make sure that you look at those right before the interview. So, okay, what are my research questions? Okay, to remind yourself again, what are the driving questions here? So that you end up asking the right questions. Then you're going to be wanting to write out a few general questions about what you saw in the class. So think of when you ask questions as being two general types. You can ask questions about what teachers typically do, and you can ask questions specifically about what happened in class. So in the interview guide, you want to make sure you ask a lot of questions about what you observed. We can anticipate some of the questions now. We can kind of think, well, I'll probably be asking these types of questions, right? And we can talk about those and design our instrument now. But after you observe your class or in your classes, go back to your interview guide, and you may have to make some modifications. You may have to say, okay, I observed this strategy in class, happened a lot. I need to ask specific questions about that. And when you're in your interview, you can say, I noticed that you did this. Why did you do that? How did you do? Was that difficult for you? What were you thinking in that moment? That type of thing. To ask as many questions as you can about that one case, that one instance that you observed, because you really want the questionnaire to complement what you observed. It's not asking just about, what do you always do? What do you do? Right? Your questionnaire, you ask those types of questions. That's fine. Because you're looking at, trying to filter through and choose your participants. But when you get to the interview, really try to focus in on what you observed, because you want to understand what you observed. When you observe, you can only understand so much, right? You saw something happen, but you may have to ask the teacher to get more insight into how it happened, why it happened, right? And you can ask questions like, well, does it always happen like you did it today? Okay, so you can include questions about general practice, but it's all rooted, it's all based in an experience that you observed personally, okay? So keep that in mind whenever you're drafting your interview guide. And you can come up with some ideas right now about what you might ask. But it's probably worth looking at again right before you do the interview, after you've observed the class, to make sure again that you're asking the right questions. Now, you're going to be doing a semi-structured interview, so you want it to be as conversational as possible. You don't want to list out 20 questions and you go to question number 1, to question number 2, question number 3. You want it to be more conversational. So think of asking general questions or writing out in your interview guide general questions. And think of that one general question. What are all the possible additional sub-questions or more detailed questions that all relate to that one question, right? Without writing it, preferably without writing it down, because if you write down all these possible questions, you're going to get lost. It's going to be, the teacher's going to feel like he or she's being interrogated, and it won't. It's not as. I wouldn't recommend it. You want to try to put the teacher in a more comfortable conversational situation where he or she's more willing, hopefully, to express ideas, right, in a more detailed and honest way. So you might start off by asking, how do you think the class went today? So she starts talking, right? And let's say that she says something that links to one of your strategy questions. Then you say, okay, I noticed that you said this when the students said that. Does that always happen? How did that happen? Is that what you planned on doing? then you can start asking
Try
more
to
questions.
kind of
Details, but from first have the teacher give you or talk to you first about general information. Now, if the teacher doesn't give you the right information, then you're going to have to kind of guide the teacher into specific questions that you observed, right? But the idea is that you start off general, that the conversation starts to flow, and hopefully that the teacher is kind of recalling as much as possible through normal conversation, or as normal as possible, right? Now, one other thing that I do for the interview guide is I list on the interview guide the content question words. What, how, where, why, with whom. And next, I leave space next to it. When I'm in the conversation and I ask my first question, I glance down and I say, okay, I'm going to ask a what question. And I put just a little mark next to what. And I listen to the teacher. And I listen to the teacher, and the teacher's going to be telling me information, hopefully about the what, hopefully about what you asked. Now, the teacher might also answer the how. Even though you didn't ask how, they may start asking. In fact, they may not even tell you answer the what. They may answer the how. But you're really trying to pay attention and listen and see if the teacher's asking or answering the question by telling you what, how, why, and whatever they're telling you, you want to try at that moment to just put a little check mark. Okay, how? The teacher just explained how. Check. Now I need to ask why because the teacher didn't tell me why. So I ask, okay, well, why did you do that particular thing? You're focusing on one thing, on one topic, one strategy, one thing that you mentioned or that you noticed in your class. And you're asking different content questions around that one thing. What about it? How did it happen? Why did it happen? When does it happen? Does it always happen in this type of environment? So that you are hopefully getting or using different question words to understand more about that one thing that you asked. When you have exhausted all the questions that you think that you have for that one thing, then you move on to something else. And then you ask the what, the how, the why, the when, the where, with whom, which students, right? And then once you have all that information, you go to the next. Now, it's not necessary to answer all the question words on every topic, but what you want to avoid is only having the what of one thing and forgetting to ask, well, how does that happen? Or forgetting to ask, well, why does that happen? Or forgetting to ask, when does that happen? Yeah? So that you have as much information about that one thing as you proceed throughout your interview. Does that make sense? All right, so in your interview guide, those topics, those individual things, adelante.
Hola,
Hola.
sí, venía a entregar lo de
Ok, de
el
servicio social.
servicio, la de las horas
¿Y tienes tu
extras.
copia?
Sí, ya le saqué copia.
Ok, muy bien.
Gracias.
Bye. So, in your interview guide, try to write out those 2 or 3 or 4 things that you're going to ask about. That's what I mean by not having a list of all the questions, but you have maybe one question or just a statement, just a phrase. I'm going to ask about this. Then I'm going to ask about this. Then I'm going to ask about this.
Okay.
All right. So you design the guide, the interview guide, however, these are all tips, right? These are ways that you can do it, but the idea is that you try to get as much information from the teacher as possible. What you don't want to happen is leave the interview and say, oh, I should have asked, why didn't I ask that? I forgot. So do whatever you have to do and include it in that interview to make sure that you end up asking the right questions. And, if you leave an interview, always reflect later after you finish each interview. Ask yourself, did I get all the information? Did I get enough? If you feel like you need another interview, then obviously you need to try to plan on scheduling another interview, right? So we're going to have a time, we have 3-4 weeks to do our data collection. And so always ask yourself, do you have enough information to answer your research questions? And as we go along, plan accordingly. If you think you need another observation, then plan an observation. If you need another interview, plan another interview. But the idea here is hopefully we have 2 more weeks after this week to finish our designs. Hopefully you can finish early next week with your designs so that you can start applying and start collecting your data before. If we can get an extra week in data collection, okay, I think that would be to your advantage. But it all depends on first getting these instruments cleaned up and getting them, as they need to be. So, I'm going to go at your pace. If you have something done before our next tutoring session next Friday, if you have something on Tuesday or Wednesday, bring it in. I'll look at it, and then you can apply it, and you can start.
Okay.
So not to wait till next Friday and then the next week, and so try now to. I think we can get a step ahead, and also we need to be looking at your literature review. Make sure that you are finalizing your literature review, making the changes, making sure that if you do have questions about my feedback, that you contact me in Canvas or come by my office. All right. ¿Cómo ves?
Okay.
So,
A lot of work.
A lot of information, a lot of work, but let's take it así, paso por paso. Así, right? First, instruments. Let's get those cleaned up, then we go from there. The literature review. Make sure you go back and start making those changes while it's still fresh. If you have questions, we'll sit and talk through it. If you're not sure about how to fix something.
So this first questionnaire, when do I have to apply it?
I would recommend that you try to apply it next week.
Next week. Okay.
Yeah, because you want to try. I would like for you to have the results of your questionnaire for next Friday, so that you can tell me, or we can discuss which participants are the best participants to answer your research questions. And then that way, maybe the following week you can start your data collection. You can talk to those people and say, okay, can I start that next week? That would give you 1 extra week of data collection, because we have technically 2 more weeks before we start data collection. But if you can get everything together for next week, then you're going to have a full extra week that you can start a week early to start your data collection, which, if we can arrange it, if you have everything together, then we need to take advantage of that extra week, right? And, and make sure also, and I've talked to most of you, and I uploaded this information in Canvas. If you think that you need to have permission, or if you think you need permission to observe or do your research, now's the time to get that permission. Even if it turns out that you don't go to that school, it's better to have the permission and not need it than need it and not have it. So if you think that you're going to a certain school, una prepa, y tú sabes, ¿no? Ellos siempre lo necesitan algo, un formato, hoy mismo vas allá, háblales, ¿qué permiso necesitan? ¿Tienen un formato? Si no, ¿qué información necesitan? ¿Verdad? Si necesitas una firma de mí o del jefe del departamento de idiomas de aquí, pregúntales. Para que tú puedas comenzar con este proceso, esos trámites, porque va a ser, está fuera de tus manos.
Sí, sí.
Es decir, puedes iniciarlo, ¿verdad? Pero va a dejarlo y alguien tiene que firmar y quién sabe por cuánto tiempo va a tardar y no puedes comenzar sin eso. Y siempre pasa. Tengo alumnos que estamos en la primera, segunda semana de data collection y ¿qué pasa? No pueden hacer nada porque todavía está esperando una firma de alguien. Entonces, ahorita es cuando hay que sacar estos permisos si es necesario. Pero pregúntale, si ellos dicen que no hay problema, bien, ya sabes, pero pregúntale, no asumir que, no, yo pienso que pues hay que checar bien
como
eso.
Como en primera cuestión que voy a aplicar, ¿cuántos maestros me recomiendas que porque, bueno, vas a seleccionar 2 o 3.
Ok, vas a seleccionar 2 o 3. Pues comienzas con... No es un número, ¿verdad? X, ¿no? Tú vas a evaluar, aplica 5 y ver con esto. Okay. Y ver. Si piensas, lo que estás buscando es entre esos 2 o 3 maestros que vas a escoger, ¿cómo son diferentes de los otros? ¿Qué es así diferente de ellos? Como algo, like something that's unique. What makes them different than the rest, or something interesting that really draws your attention, obviously, to your research questions. And then look at, two, how you might either compare, if you're looking at 2 teachers, how you might compare these 2.
Because I wanna try to compare teachers from secondary school and primary school. I don't know if it is
Alright. All right. The reason that you're doing your questionnaire is for you to determine why you chose those teachers. So don't decide right now
Okay.
if you're going to compare 2 different schools or prepa de secundaria. Don't make that determination right now. Get the results first, then decide.
But I can apply teachers from different
Yeah,
levels.
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if that's if you apply it to whomever that you want, and you know, if you only apply it to elementary schools, obviously that's limiting the number, right? So my recommendation in this case, you need to try to find teachers who are more willing, or who are willing to, or that are actually focusing on reading comprehension. So you have to kind of think about who might be focusing more on reading comprehension and try to search those out, because that's the purpose, is really you're trying to find those teachers who are think that reading comprehension is very important, and they spend a lot of time on reading comprehension. That's like the thing that you want to focus on. And one thing to consider, I don't know about lenguas extranjeras, no he visto el plan, su programa, no sé si hubo cambios, pero cuando yo estaba ahí, cuando estaba el fomento de lenguas extranjeras, en el programa, los primeros 4 semestres, por escrito, dijeron que estaba enfocado más en lectura. Entonces, eso es algo que puede, tal vez, si te interesa, puedes investigar si todavía hay un énfasis o una estabilidad, porque así por escrito dijo, hay que pasar más tiempo en reading comprehension. Ahora no sé cómo es, tal vez lo cambiaron, pero creo que vale pena, como estás enfocando en pues pregúntale.
Pero, por ejemplo, no afecta que my little review está basado a lo mejor en elementary school o en basic education, más que nunca.
¿Y todo está enfocado?
No realmente, pero sí trato de enfocarme un poquito. No te des.
Mira, hay que ver si... no, está bien si los conceptos aplica,
Ok.
¿verdad? Si está así hablando de muy de los niños, pues tal vez no, pero pues yo pienso que, pero como yo me recuerdo, tu review era, no era así nada más en niños.
Ajá.
Está bien hablando de niños porque hay algunas cosas que también va a aplicar.
Okay.
Es una opción, ¿no? Si ellos dicen, no, pues ahorita se cambió y ahorita no estamos enfocando en eso. Pero cualquier escuela, cualquier maestro, también vale pena ver por el programa, por algo por escrito, por el plan de estudios, lo que tienen, si hay algo por escrito sobre esta habilidad. Si ellos dicen, no, pues todos son iguales, okay, está bien. Ahora ya pregúntale a los maestros y ver qué opinan, cómo presentan, cómo practican en su clase esta habilidad. Pero bueno, pues sí, entonces vamos a seguir así para la próxima semana, pensando ya la idea, tener todo listo para la próxima semana.
Voy a modificar eso, acomodar bien el primer cuestionario para poder aplicar entre martes y miércoles.
Sí, la preferencia.
El viernes traerte resultados y ya en base a eso determinar cuáles sí y observar.
Así es. Y con todos los instrumentos también quiero ver tu
A la-
observation
la-
sheet,
la-
así muy sencillo,
Y
así.
el instructor
Y también quiero ver un ejemplo, quiero ver así más o menos
Ajá.
la estructura de tu guía de la entrevista.
Ok.
¿Sí? Claro que si hay cambios después está bien, pero nada más quiero ver que ya más o menos tienes la idea. Quiero
Ajá.
ver que hago.
Para que cuando observe, ahora sí, ir
Ahora,
acomodando
chequelo
todo.
otra vez.
Ajá.
Tal vez hay que modificar algo.
Ajá.
Ajá. Porque al final necesitas obviamente el instrumento plano, así
Ajá.
en blanco, pero la guía actual, lo que tú actualmente hiciste, ¿verdad?
Ok.
Ajá. Pero ahorita es nada más para planear más o menos cómo es y distinguir bien que las preguntas en la guía están muy dirigido de un evento a algo que pasó, lo que tú observaste en las clases, no tanto de cómo practican en general.
Ok.
¿Sí?
Ok.
Entonces esa es la...
Ok, sí,
es
más
la
o menos
idea.
así para ir determinado el tiempo de cada cosa y ir avanzando. Y de lo de eso de las escuelas, yo te envío hoy en Canvas Anima,
Ujú.
para comentarte si sí ocupo o no ocupo, porque tengo pensadas
¿De
algunas
qué,
escuelas
perdón? De...
para lo del documento donde la firma, o no sé si ocupe algo para...
Ah, ok, sí.
para-
Si tú necesitas algo
Ajá.
de mí, puedes enviarme como un formato.
Ah, ok.
Tú me dices, tú hagas la carta y yo lo firmo. O yo lo imprimo y lo firmo. Y claro, también con el visto bueno del jefe.
¿El lunes se va a trabajar aquí?
No,
No.
pero yo estoy checando siempre eso.
Ok.
Entonces, pero pregunta bien,
Ajá.
¿qué debería tener si ellos no tienen su formato? ¿Qué debe tener el formato y quién lo firma?
Ok.
¿Quién tiene que firmar?
Ok.
Si tú, yo o
O
el jefe de departamento. Yo pienso que siempre el jefe de departamento, pero ver también quién más.
Ok, sí,
Para que sí, ellos tienen todo.
Porque, bueno, te voy a buscar, más bien estoy en contacto con una o dos escuelas, porque menciono más o menos 6, 7 teachers, o 5 o 6 teachers, los que más o menos pretendo
Ajá.
aplicar el cuestionario para ahí seleccionarlos. Entonces, como no son muchas, pues puedo informarme para hacértelo saber.
Sí, y piensas también de la logística, porque
Ajá.
obviamente si hay una escuela que tiene un montón de maestros,
Ajá.
¿verdad? Y es algo, no sé, pues tal vez con una escuela,
Ajá.
una vez
Sí, por eso no
aplican
tengo,
X, ¿verdad?
ajá, dos escuelas.
Pero aquí en la universidad también,
También hay.
o puede ser un maestro de adultos y otro de niños también,
Ujú.
pero no deciden tanto ahorita. Primero, la preferencia se aplica un poco de varias edades y también niveles de inglés.
Ok.
Y ya desde ahí tú decides. Tal
A
vez
ver,
todo en nivel 1,
Ajá.
niños y adultos, o así otra. Pero sí, con la información de los cuestionarios puedes puedes hacer una decisión más informada, más dirigido, porque después tienes que explicar la justificación, por qué escogiste estas, y tienes que decir por qué. De hecho, en tu presentación vas a decir, estos son los participantes, escogí esas por estas razones. Okay?
Okay.
All right, Cuauhtemoc. Have a good week, and just let's correspond in Canvas if you have questions or doubts, or come by my office
Okay.
so that we can...
Yes, I want to notice if I need that signature or something like that to print it out and
Okay.
then to apply the question.
Muy bien.
Okay, man.
All right.
See you then.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
Have a nice weekend.
All right. Thank you. You too.